Everyone. As we tie up our loose ends, kind of finish the rest of this draft process, which is a long, years-long process, I want to give credit to a lot of people, first and foremost our college staff that spend so much time on this and really is the foundation for what we do from a decision-making standpoint. In the manner we make decisions in this building, we involve a lot of people. That's our coaching staff, the rest of our personnel staff, performance, medical. A lot of people who put a lot of time, so I want to give them a lot of gratitude. We have a lot of levers we can pull in team building and different things, draft, free agency, trades, and they're all connected. And, we started this off season with a plan. Kevin, myself, our staffs kind of came together and had a vision for what we want to be. And we were able to do some great things, bring in Will Fries and Ryan Kelly on the interior line to fortify it. Defensive line, we bring in Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave to add some dynamic elements to our defensive line. You talk about being able to bring back Aaron Jones and trading for Jordan Mason to provide a really complementary backfield, re-signing Murph, bringing in Isaiah Rodgers and bringing in Jeff Okudah, another great addition. So we were able to do a lot of different things, and I didn't name everybody I could, but we were able to do a lot of different things that I think really sets us up for the draft. We want to be in a place where we're proactive, not reactive. Impact focused, not need focused, and that's a credit to our staffs and the vision and just the collaboration we were able to put together a plan for where we're at. So with that, we're excited to have the players back in the building on Monday, excited to see what's to come in the draft, and we're looking forward to putting the final bows on this offseason.
Kwesi, when it comes to trading down, it's a big part of the conversation. There's a bunch of different trade value charts that people have invented. I guess, how do you view that challenge of picking the best player that's on board versus the idea of picking up more draft picks by moving back?
Yeah, two separate questions and a great one. I'll start with the first part of that, just draft strategy. A lot of times it's impact, and that impact can be one great player or multiple good players, also realizing that it's uncertain, and you don't know necessarily for sure that the one player is going to be good and all those different dynamics. So that's really the conversation you have. Right now at this point in the draft, we try and make sure our board is correct in terms of how we view things. You got to prepare yourself. You're picking 24th. You better be able to call 24 and have 24 names that you're willing to stand up and clap and feel great about. So that's the first and foremost and the foundation of how we build this thing, the trades and all those things, scenarios they come. Moving over to the charts and different valuations, it's a difficult exercise. It's something that I've been fascinated by. I built a chart myself. I've seen other different charts, and they all take different assumptions that, or quite frankly, this is a hard exercise. How do you value a great player in a great position? You could assign a number to it, right? When you assign that number to it, does that incorporate the scarcity of that type of player? If you don't get that player in the draft, you can't typically get that player in free agency. So how do you put a number on that aspect of it? Different people have different ways of doing that, and I've seen people in San Francisco do it, in Cleveland do it, myself, all the different things, and you appreciate the different methods. I think the best thing you can do is understand why each chart is built the way it is, and kind of maybe for each decision you make, understand kind of how you're using it for you and kind of go with that chart value there. It's a great question. It's a fascinating thing. I don't know that anybody's going to solve it because, you're trying to assign a number to a thing that's not really perfectly easy to do so.
How have you landed on quality versus quantity on this over the years? And I guess now that you've done this for the fourth time, been through this process, the pre-draft process for the fourth time, there's going to be a lot of talk about 4 picks.
Yep.
How do you land on the quality of the player you get versus having multiple shots at it?
Yeah, it's a conversation that's evolving, I would say, and it's the quality of quantity, but it's quality and quantity in the draft, but quality and quantity versus what's your alternative. So is that thing that you're trying to find quantity of available elsewhere in different avenues that we have, like I talked about earlier, the trade market, the draft market, free agency market. So it is a conversation that just depends on the specific player or position you're talking about in relation to that year and what's available. It's a really interesting. You talk about some unique players that are available in this draft. Quality versus quantity when you're talking about a player and availability in different aspects. It's ultimately at the end of the day we try and look at these moves in a vacuum. At the end of the day, they're not. They're moves that are all part of a 2-year window, part of other moves that you make. It's just a lot incorporated as long as you're intentional about why you're doing what you're doing and you have kind of the plan in place to make all those other moves. It's a good thing for an organization.
To what extent does the 4 picks sort of impacted your overall offseason, free agency trades, whatever, in draft capital you have is the draft capital you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we always talk about things in 2-year windows. These are things that this offseason, we knew we were going to be able to do last offseason. So kind of understanding that allowed us to maybe do some of the things we did last draft. I think you do have to make sure that, as I talked about, being proactive, not reactive, those different things. If you have less picks, obviously you're probably not in a great place to be in a reactive position, given how you don't know how the board can fall to you. But these are things that we've kind of planned out over the course of the past couple of years, and we feel confident about it. And we'll maximize, no matter if it's this year, next year, years to come. We'll always maximize what we have and try and do the best thing for the Vikings.
Kwesi, where do you see the strengths in this draft?
You don't want to be on record before the draft. I know there's been some previous drafts where people would have said this position wasn't very good, and there's been some really good players to come out of that. Kind of what I mentioned to Ben earlier. It's about it's not just things in a vacuum. It's an intentional plan, I think, for each player that comes into an organization. We try and be a positive, optimistic, glass half full organization when we evaluate players. What can they do? So we think there's a lot of good players at a lot of different good positions that we put in our schemes and our systems that could be pretty good. I don't know that everybody's answers would be the same, but that's the beauty of this thing.
How do you balance drafting for need with drafting reputed best player available? And has all the work you've done in veteran free agency and trades allowed you to maybe target certain positions?
Yeah, that's kind of what I mentioned in my opener, just really trying to be, you want to get in a place, you have to earn the right to be the type of team and a type of organization that drafts for impact and not need. I think we were able to do that a lot in what we did in free agency and some of the things we've done the past couple of years here to build to that place, to your point. I mean, you're always gonna want to break ties with, I don't want to say need, but just the things that can impact you the soonest, and also provide the most impact on your team. But, there's always going to be a need and want for good players at every position. Even if it's a need that you don't see today, it's the league. It's always going to come in a short-term horizon. So I think those are the dynamics. Without a perfect snowball glass of what it's going to look like, there's dynamics where you just want to be intentional about what you're doing, know why you did it, when you did it, so that when the bullets come, you understood and you were intentional about it.
Kwesi, do you have a personal tiebreaker if there's two players on the board and you say pretty much, they're equal in many different aspects for you personally? Is there something a tiebreaker? I like this aspect of that more.
Yeah, we kind of have these decision-making meetings, we call them, where we kind of get together and have those scenarios and talk about them together. It's rare that it's perfectly equal. Obviously, there's going to be pluses and minuses on both sides of the thing. You talk about play histories, production, traits, football character, off the field. There's so many things. A lot of times, though, I will say buy-in is a big part of it. Football is a sport with variance day to day. Variance game to game, quarter to quarter, play to play. And so the thing that I think, and I don't know that there's a test for this, but I think the thing that will allow players to succeed is buy-in from myself, Kevin, his staff, my staff. So when he has that bad day, hey guys, we all look each other in the eye, remember why we wanted this person here and all those skill sets we thought they had in them. So we'll give them the time and patience to be able to achieve those things. So that'll typically be the thing that swings me, because I just think that's the best odds for success for the player.
Kwesi, when you talk about those windows and not each draft being in a vacuum, if there are players generally that you've drafted high, like say 2 to 3 years ago, who have not panned out at that position, when you enter a draft, are you more like, do you have to sort of fight being that part of your analysis? Like, we need to take a swing again, or maybe we shouldn't because
That's a great
we
question.
invested that capital.
I totally agree. It's a great question. The hard part is these things aren't binary. 2 to 3 years in, you don't really have the ability to say yes or no definitively unless the player is or is really maybe not on your team or something like that. So we do a lot of work based on historical data, just experiential data with our coaches and our front office people who've been around players and say, hey, what does it look like? Certain positions take time. It's one of the things you'll hear me say, and I say it in all the building. You see these growth curves and the dark arts of the pass rush. It takes time to figure out how to beat some of these outstanding tackles on the edge. It takes time to quarterback to understand an offense and have everything slow down. So really the hard part is trying to go back in time at some of the players that have come before it and know what that team sort of saw and knew and know what might come for you. But again, I'll always go back to your intentional plan and what you're doing. And I feel like if you have that plan and you're working arrow up towards that thing and the player is working towards it, you're always going to give the benefit of the doubt towards the player going the direction that you thought, unless you're getting just extreme evidence otherwise.
Kwesi, as you self-scouted
this draft with the greatest needs of
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
How would you compare the strength of this draft in view of what you have going in, number 24 and others, with the needs of the Vikings?
I don't know that I can answer that specific question, but I can tell you that, given where we're picking, we're excited about a lot of different players at every part of the board that we have current picks at. That we'll be excited to stand up and clap. That'll help this team not just this year with year one roles where we think can help us this year, but for the future. And I think that's a lot of different positions. So we're excited about that.
As you sort of self-scouted over the years, or in last year in particular, would you still do the two trades to get to 23 and to get to 17 that resulted in
The first trade to get to 23.
Yeah, the first trade to get to 23 and then the second one to get to 17.
I think you always go back and, I love these questions where you go back because I'm pretty tough on myself. I would say I'm not, when you're trying to self-improvement, holding yourself to that standard. We all have that little voice that says we're good enough, and I'm not scared of questioning that voice every now and again to be really hard on myself. But I think I know exactly why we did those things at the time. The move to get to 23, was about optionality. It was about kind of, maybe a perceived gun-to-head need at a certain position and never wanting to be in that place, in addition to wanting to be the last call if anybody was considering a trade, which, again, I think we executed in that regard. Also knowing at that time, and again, we talk about 2-year horizons, again, you never know. You don't want to be planning to pick in the top third of the first round. So are these opportunities available for you in your future? Are we going to be able to pick a player like this in the future if we're the team that we think we can be? Those are all things that went into the calculus, and ultimately don't know how that answer is going to work out. But looking back on it, we feel good about that exact approach and that exact thought process.
When you talk about how certain things take time, certain things take time, and you also talk about drafting for impact, does that skew your draft strategy to a certain position or against a certain position?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think impact's got to be seen over a time period. Obviously, you're always going to weight more towards current. But again, back to the earlier question, it's about the scarcity of that thing. If it's going to take 4 years for that position, but if you don't draft it, you're not going to get it anywhere else. That's got to factor into your impact calculation. So it's a great question. I think it's something that we got to consider, those dynamics, the short term versus the long term, and all those different dynamics.
How do you assess the need at tight end with TJ and Josh back, but maybe needing one in that room?
Yeah, that's roster spot wise, that's probably an easy place to look and see that the Vikings would want to add something. But need. I don't love using the word need. You'll see sometimes I want to be positive focused. It's want. We want certain types of players on our team. But when you start that question with TJ and Josh and you say the word need, I feel a little bit champagne problemish in terms of the phrase of the word need. I think those are two dynamic players at their positions, the ability to give us a lot of great skill sets. And we're excited about add somebody else in that room, however that comes. Again, the draft is just one of the avenues that we have. But that from a number standpoint, that is a position we will address.
When you talk about avenues, obviously the draft is a little more projection, but you have cost control for a few years, whereas free agents, you have guys that have done at the NFL level. I guess, how do you view those things kind of in comparison to one another in terms of effectiveness to build a team?
Yeah, it's in some sense it's an insurance product, right? It is a unique thing where you're paying, but you're paying for known versus the unknown, you're paying for less. But where that's hard is when, and you're never one or two players away, but what if that unknown is the difference between you being the team that you thought you could be versus not? It's a fascinating, argument. When I'm not doing this one day and I'll go be an economics professor again, maybe I'll work on some equations and we'll talk about it in that space. But that is the conversation. Ultimately, that is the conversation that we have. We don't look at, like I said, you don't look at these moves in a vacuum. You look at your team in this holistic sense, what's in that room, and say, hey, if this player who is more of an unknown hits, okay, well, what does that mean? And then what does that mean I want to have around that player, in terms of certainty versus uncertainty? There's nothing I'm going to come up here and tell you to say that I've cracked the code, but I would say that those are the conversations we have, and we frame it that way, just like you have.
Last year for Kwesi, at quarterback, how quickly do you guys expect them to move for a veteran after once the conflict situation settles?
It hasn't only been about the comp pick situation, but we are on the look for that. The comp pick thing is always a thing where it's, look, last year we brought in Grenard in forfeited a comp pick. It's an opportunity cost of signing somebody. It's not the end all be all. When you find a 27-year-old pass rusher who fits your team and skill sets that you want, you go do it because you ask yourself, would I rather have? And the answer sometimes is I would rather have that really good player. Other times the answer is something different. But quarterback-wise, we're going to focus on just as my staff always does, best opportunities there. So we're not going to rush it either way, but we're always mindful of it.
How do you feel about the makeup currently of the safety?
Really good. We're super happy to bring back Harrison. I left that out of my intro. I think he's my favorite, so I don't like talking about him a bunch. But bring back Harrison, being able to extend Theo, Josh obviously here for another year, so we get continuity and communication on the back end. Jay Ward's another young player that we have there, so we're excited about being versatile and how we continue to play. We're always going to look for opportunities. Again, not to be repeat the same question. That's the job of my staff, but I will always look for opportunities.
I was going to ask actually about bringing Harrison back, but just, I guess with bringing Harrison back and also bringing back Byron, what do those two guys bring, obviously, to Coach Flo's defense, but just to experience in the locker room as well? Yeah,
it's experience in the locker room. It's leadership. It's, there's just something special about people like that. Their football intelligence. You talk about, we've talked a lot about rookies and their development, all different things like that. The odds of a rookie developing are very different in a room with Byron Murphy and Harrison Smith versus other players, and having that example to look from. There's no number, there's nothing that I could assign to tell you guys what it's like to have Harrison Smith in this building. You guys know it. You guys have probably appreciated it before I even got here. And Byron Murphy has come in and been somebody that we really rely on. In terms of his football character, his intelligence, the way he plays on the field, just from a coverage standpoint, his ability to do a lot of different things in terms of versatility. He's just been a great addition. We want to keep adding players like that. We can never have enough guys like that. I wish I was one of those players that my coaches said, we can't never have enough Kwesis. That was never said about me. But we want to have those guys. We're so happy to have him back. There will be a day. Harrison, when he came in, he said there will be a day. I think I joked with him. You've been a safety here as long as I've been a GM. You say, buddy, there's going to be a day where that's not going to happen. And I don't look forward to that day. But he's been such a great player here.
Kwesi, you mentioned before how much you enjoy collaborating with Kevin. I'm curious in terms of working with him throughout this process. What are some growth areas that you've noticed that you think have created an advantage or benefit?
It is one of my favorite things. We don't, in these jobs, a lot of times when you're coming up, the reason you get to the job isn't the thing you're spending the most of your time on. So the times that me and him just get to sit in an office and talk ball, talk about liking these players is some of my favorite parts of the job. But how we both grow, and I would say as the building has grown, is you always grow as a decision-making group. These are things you can say. I can say to somebody these odds of something happening, or I can look them in the eye and, hey, remember this conversation we had 3 years ago and how that went, whether that maybe I said the wrong thing and I've evolved or how it played out. I think there's just so much you learn from that shared experience together. I think any company would probably tell you that in making decisions. And so I think that's just both how we've grown, and the things we both believe have kind of merged more towards the center, and it's foundationally built with evidence, worn through experience, different things roster-wise even. Hey, would we carry this many players? Man, you remember how that was like in 2022? Let's make sure that it's this type of player so that when those moments come in week 8 when we're having a hard time with the roster decision, just those things, those experience things are just invaluable together.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.